So hey everybody, I'm on video. I wasn't going to do this. I was going to be sticking to myself and taking care of the family and the farm, but things need to be said, and so um, hopefully everybody takes a look at this. Once again, my name's Tim Hazlow. I had run for Congress in the second congressional district, and as a Republican in a blue district, and it didn't go so well. Didn't go so bad either. We got as many, if not more, votes than just about any other Republican, other than one, I think, in our district in 20 some odd years. So that's a big deal. So there's plenty of Republicans. There's plenty of conservatives out there. Um, I'm a retired guy. Those of you who know me from the election know who I am and have heard my story, but I'll give it to you real quick since this is my first video and we're going to do this every week going forward. As long as it gets good reception, I'll keep going. Um, but I'm a retired military guy. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I'm actually a grandfather, believe it or not. It's hard for me to believe. Met my wife in high school, and we've been married ever since. I've been around the world. I've seen things that everybody should have the privilege of seeing and doing, and I've also done and seen things that uh, people should never have to experience or see or do. So um, I like to think that I'm well versed. I've been to third world countries. I've been to first world countries. I've been to countries that probably shouldn't even be in the world. Right? There's a lot of things going out there um, that we can work on, and I think that if we can't take care of ourselves here at home first, how are we going to help other people around the world? How are we going to help other people outside our own families if we can't take care of our own homes? So it starts in the home. It starts with the family. So there's lots of things we can talk about, and I think because the election just happened, maybe we should start with the election, right? Um, and it's hard to do. It's hard to do with all of this, with YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and all these social media sites censoring uh, every little thing. I was censored by Facebook at one point in time because I thanked Island County for endorsing me, the Island County Republican Party for endorsing me. And Facebook said that I had done something incorrect according to their rules, couldn't tell me what that was, yet they shut me off. They would not let me run political advertisements for a while. And I had to reapply and start all over from the beginning. So yeah, it's ridiculous out there. So we're going to be real careful and realize that everybody knows what VF is. If we're talking about VF, VOTERFRAUD. Um, if we talk about that stuff, uh, VF is the term, and that's what we're going to talk about. So I've made some notes here, so I'm going to look down every once in a while. Um, but it seems like more than half of the country now, according to statistics out there, I'm not making this up. I'm talking about things from CNN and Fox News and other mainstream medias. Not that I'm a big mainstream media guy. I kind of don't like very many of them at all at this point in time. But they all have come out and said that 52, 60, 78%, different percentages from each side, but more than half of the voting population thinks that voter fraud is real. Oops, I just said it. That VF is real, right? Hopefully they don't censor me on my first video. We'll find out. But that VF is real and that it's out there and that it happens. The question isn't if it happens. Anybody with the inclination to go out and look and to listen and to see what's going on knows that it happens. The question is, to what extent does it happen? To what extent? I mean, that truly is the question, right? If it's just 3 or 4 votes in a state, that's not acceptable, but it's, well, acceptable, right? But if it's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of votes across the country, is that acceptable? How can we accept that? How can we have trust in our elections? I don't know. I personally don't have trust in our elections. I don't trust the mail in vote. And I've been doing mail in voting for a while now. I'm a citizen of Washington State. It's been a disaster since we started. I know people like to think it's a good thing, but the Republicans really haven't won any major seats in the state of Washington since we went to mail in balloting. Hmm. Coincidence? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. So let's talk about a few things. Well, let's take, for instance, an article I read just today. And it was written today. I think it was ABC or NBC. Let me see. I got it written down here. NBC News 4 out of Los Angeles was talking about two men that are being brought to court, being charges pressed against them for filing thousands and thousands of voter applications for homeless people that in a lot of cases weren't eligible to vote. In a lot of cases didn't file it themselves, didn't even know it was being filed. And so these people are being brought to court for this. These people, these two men, one of them who was actually running for mayor, right, um, is actually having charges pressed against him for this. I mean, we're talking thousands and thousands of votes here, or potential votes. We don't know if it actually went to votes or not yet, but I'm sure we'll find out as time goes on. But if it's happening there, you can't tell me it's not happening in other places. I'll give you another, for instance. Let's stay closer to home. I received a ballot for a guy that used to live in this home this year. I received it during the primary earlier this year. 2 years ago, I received it during the primary and the general. 2 years before that, I received it during the primary and general. This has been going on for about 14 years now. I know the guy. He's a good friend of mine. He lives in South Carolina. We talk all the time. I've said this to him every time I get the ballot. And he calls the Secretary of State or whomever he thinks he needs to call, and he tells them, hey, I'm registered to vote in South Carolina. I no longer live at that address. I haven't lived at that address since 2007-8 time frame. Why do you keep sending a ballot there? And they assure him that the ballot won't go again. And yet every election, like clockwork, I get this ballot. And I posted it on Facebook this last time, so you can go check out my Facebook feed, and you can see a picture of this ballot that came to my home again, like it has done over and over and over the years. So that's just one example. I mean, if a ballot like that's coming to my house, how many people out there around the state? Let's just talk about Washington. How many people around the state of Washington are getting these ballots? Now that in itself is not fraud, but it's inviting fraud. It is inviting fraud. So it's not fraud unless somebody takes that ballot and mails it in, fills it out and mails it in, and forges a signature and so on and so forth, right? But the potential is there. The potential is there. Let's take another, for instance. I had a volunteer on my campaign, and he called me the other day, and he says, hey, Tim, I just spent a few minutes out there online on the Secretary of State website with some generic information, and I found 2 deceased people that managed to cast a ballot. 2 deceased people that managed to cast a ballot. This guy's not an expert. He's just a volunteer that was curious. Couldn't believe that not just me, but in the state of Washington, that conservatives got beat so soundly. Pretty disturbing in itself. It got beat so soundly in this election. When across the rest of the country, conservatives didn't get beat that soundly. As a matter of fact, conservatives picked up seats across the country. We have more houses, more state legislations and senates in the hands of Republicans, more governors in the hands of Republicans. We picked up tons of seats in the House, and we'll probably flip it over to the majority during the midterms. And we're going to hold the Senate. And yet in the state of Washington, we had established Republican people that were already elected officials that lost by staggering amounts, like Luann up in Whatcom. Wow, one of the best people I know. And somehow she lost. Hard to figure out. But yeah, so this guy was able to find 2 in a matter of just an hour or so on the internet, as not even an investigator, just doing his own homework. That's kind of crazy. How about this? Let's talk about the Department of Licensing. I don't know if you guys have watched the video that Chris Gergen put out recently, but it's a good video. Yeah, he's a little frustrated because they lost. He was one of the campaign managers, if not the campaign manager, for the Culp campaign. I respect those guys. Those guys worked hard. They put tons of time and effort into it. I felt privileged to be on the stage with that guy. And man, I sure hope he comes out and supports me if I decide to run again in 2 years. But let's talk about this video. So he put out this video and he was talking about the Department of Licensing here in the state of Washington. And when you go to apply for an ID, they automatically register you to vote. They ask, do you want to register to vote or not? And if you say yes, it just happens automatically. They don't verify, they don't care who you are. And in the state of Washington, you can't tell me that people who aren't supposed to be getting Washington state IDs are not getting Washington state IDs. We see it all the time. Undocumented people are out there getting driver's licenses. I'm not here to judge whether that's a good or a bad thing. My personal opinion aside, I would rather know who these people are when they get in a car accident or something than just have to guess at it. However, should they be voting in our elections? I don't think so. And so Chris has some good stories about that and some things that they're looking into, and hopefully they'll dig up some things and they'll get the attention that they deserve, and we'll go out there and we'll keep this fight up. There's an easy way to regain control of our voting system. There's an easy way to restore the faith in our electorate. I mean, there is. And you guys are all going to laugh. I mean, some of the conservatives out there and some of the older folks out there are not going to laugh. You're going to be like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. But other folks are going to be like, oh, that's archaic. We should never do this kind of stuff. But it's in-person voting at a polling station, designated based on where you live, with an ID in hand to prove who you are. You register ahead of time with your ID. You get a voter's ID in the mail, which is free. The voter's ID is free, right? So you can't tell me that somebody can't afford to get the ID. And when you show up at your polling place, they have a book or a laptop or some type of a roster, and they take your ID and they verify your ID against the roster. Yes, this person's registered. That picture, yep, that's you. Here's your ballot. There's the booth. The box is right next to the booth, right? How difficult is that? It's not very difficult at all. Now, we can debate the whole voter ID thing till we're blue in the face. And this whole thing about, well, you're discriminating against minorities and poor people and such. Bull crap. The Navy almost came out of me. I almost was a little more stiff than bull crap. Here's the facts of the matter. If you want to buy cigarettes, you have to have an ID. If you want to buy beer, you have to have an ID. If you want to drive a car, you have to have an ID. If you have a bank account, you have to have an ID. You can't tell me that these people out there living, at least the ones who are willing to go vote and put in the effort to go vote, that these people are out there living without an ID of any kind whatsoever, that they're unable to prove who they are. If they have a job, they have an ID. If they're collecting social services, they have an ID. If they're getting food stamps, they have an ID. I mean, I could go on and on and on forever. So don't give me this BS crap about voter ID disenfranchises certain people. It's a stupid talking point that carries no weight and can hold no water. It just can't hold any water. It's a terrible thing to even try to bring that argument up, right? So voter ID, in-person voting, on a paper ballot that can be tracked and verified and stored, so anybody who's interested on either side of an election, maybe that's 2 parties like we have now, maybe that's 3 or 4 parties that we end up with in the future, who knows? But anybody who's involved in that election can re-verify that ballot, and that ballot can be held on to until this election is certified and the people are put in place, and maybe even until the next election, or stored for a certain period of time. I mean, how long do you got to keep your tax return, for God's sakes, right? Just in case you might get audited by the big bad IRS. So it can be done. It should be done. The problem is, how do we do it? How do we do it? Right? That's the problem. Who's going to put this in place? I mean, if Trump somehow pulls this out, which I hope and pray he does, because Joe Biden's just absent. He's a puppet. There's no way this guy can run the country. It's mentally and physically impossible for him to do this. He's going to be played. He's going to be a puppet. He's going to be the billionaires and the elites and the deep state are just going to use him to an ends. It's Cloward and Piven. It's rules for radicals. It's right from the beginning. The ends justifies the means. They don't care if they destroy this guy and his family. They're going to use him to get what they want. And so we need to fix our elections because this never should have happened. Never should have happened. I'm going to say it again. Never should have happened. Right? So let me look. What else do we got here? Oh, well, how do we do it? Well, I think if Trump were to get in office, what he could do is he could try to get a bill passed through the Congress and Senate, which would be hard to do, that says if a federal election is involved, yes, the states are in charge of elections. However, those ballots have to be cast in person on paper. I don't care how you do it, state, right? This is how it's been done before, and this is how it should be done again. This is what we recommend that you do, but it's still up to the states, right, according to the Constitution, to administer these elections. But if there's a federal candidate on it, so what is that, Congress, Senate, President, then that ballot has to be cast in paper, in person, on Election Day. Let's make Election Day a holiday. I got no problem with that, right? Let's make Election Day a holiday so people don't have an excuse anymore not to go. And if you can't be there, like I was serving overseas for most of my 20 years, I had an absentee ballot. But I had to apply for that, and I had to prove who I was and why I couldn't be there to vote. I didn't just get it in the mail. Just blindly sending ballots out to voters is just asking for trouble, just asking for fraud. And we're going to see it. We're going to see lots and lots of fraud. Maybe not enough to turn the election around, but we're going to see tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of ballots and fraudulent ballot claims across these states over the next few months. And hopefully over the next week or so, and we can prove some of it. But it's going to happen. So we got to fix it. So maybe that's one way. Another way is in your state, whatever state you're in. Maybe in that state, you, as the population, get together and demand that we have in-person voting. I mean, it's important, you guys. It is very important. Our founding fathers knew that the people need to be educated, that the people needed to understand what they were voting for and who they were voting for and what our country stood for. And the left has spent the last 40, 50 years just pulling that out of us, just changing the narrative, trying to tell us that our country wasn't what we all believed it was. So these things can happen, and we can go out there and fight this fight. And I'm going to put some links and stuff on my website and on my Facebook page along with this video for you guys to look at. A couple of PACs that you can donate to that are looking into voter VF. I almost said it again. Oh boy, YouTube's going to like me, right? But can look into VF and a couple other sites just to get the word out, just to start looking at things and reading things and educating yourself. Don't take my word for it. Don't take my word for it, man. I'm just a normal dude that's trying to make a difference, just like you are. Just like you are. And if we don't start making a difference, I think things are going to get worse before they get better. So that's it for today. This is Tim's Talking Tuesday, and we're going to do this every Tuesday. We're going to try to keep it short, down around 20, 30 minutes at the most. We're going to start lining up some guests. I got some high-power friends that are going to come on the show, some other candidates, some people who are in office, just some media folks, some people from around town, and just some average Joes. And then we're going to start opening this up for phone calls and questions and things of that nature once it starts to take off. So once again, look for me next Tuesday on Tim's Talking Tuesday. Maybe we'll call it Tim's Taco Tuesday, right? That'd be fun. But we're going to do this, and we're going to keep this going for the next year, maybe 2 years, until we get into this next election, and then we're going to win. And we're going to take this country back, and we're going to make it the great nation that it once was. And that it still is in many respects. But boy, it's starting to slip. All right, thanks again, and I appreciate your time, and I appreciate your support. And boy, if you like the video, click on like, click on subscribe. I'm going to go ahead and put this on YouTube as well, and we'll get this thing going. All right, this is Tim signing off. God bless you, and God bless America. Good night.